This is IBM Museum, and I'm getting calls for some completion with this IBM 7496. I can fully understand. Last night, I didn't get a chance to go through and work with it, or much less get it on video. But I do intend for tonight's video to get at least this lower section with the planer fully working. And that way I just have to go through and troubleshoot the CRT sections from here. So let me get turned around and kind of provide a little bit of an update of what I'm going to do here. And of course, this is the lower unit I'm talking about. It does have connection for power going to the monitor that I have over on its side here, of course. I'll go through, and I want to have this to a level that I can go through and have connected, even if I have to, I do have to go through and have the monitor switch to go through and switch on this power supply. And it'd be nice, to come up with some extension header if I was commonly in this unit to work with it like this. But just to have a system I can go through, and I can also test the diskette drive. If that is faulty, I have the parts to go through and replace that as well. I've been testing these risers, and the battery's showing enough voltage, but I'm not sure necessarily why the settings aren't held. I'm going to go through and I'm going to replace. I'm just going to keep this riser, but I can go through and at least this is out. This riser I can get off the side here without taking out the power supply and diskette drive tray otherwise to replace that battery. These are available out there, low enough of price for me to work with that at whatever point. I do have other risers that have batteries that test out for the same voltages, so I'm just not quite sure. This is normally a 3-volt battery that's here. Now, the CPU, and I would understand these things are probably not going to have weren't designed to have the floating point processor that was underneath it, because it'd be right underneath the power supply here. There's not that much ventilation. Now, granted, those chips don't get necessarily very warm, but it's probably still a good idea to get some ventilation over the top of them. And I even have to look at this power supply a little bit more just to find out the ultimate wattage. I'm not going to get a paper clip or anything else anywhere close to this, but just to look that over with more detail. Now, it is interesting that the later Model 30 planer had some of this stuff changed around. And for the view of what the planer looks like that's in here, I mean, down to the color and everything else, this is it right here. The SIMs go in this slot, these slots here. It's got some soldered on RAM. It's got the BIOS here. And this is the CPU and the FPU socket. Then you have the diskette drive connection, which is used in this case on the system. And you have, for the proprietary hard drive, the connection here, which is, of course, unused on the system. It does not have a hard drive. It looks like these units were just designed to either have a token ring or an Ethernet board that could ripple that remote initial program load over the network, or perhaps, being labeled as a custom terminal, could have either the 5250 emulation or 3270 emulation adapters in here to look like the big iron systems, like a terminal, although that would require loading some software from the 720 KB drive, whereas the Ripple method necessarily wouldn't, where you have a token ring or an Ethernet board, and that does not require any local drives at all. It's able to boot fully over a network without any diskette being in here or anything like that. Now, I'm not, I had this out, and I'd like to have the thought of putting this in place for the appearance sake. It looks like the most original. It's got the brown PCB, but I still want to have this planar out. And this, by all indications otherwise, and I thought one of my planar, oh, okay, yeah, it does have a little bit of a marking. The 0287, meaning 1987 in this case, although this planar is older, and it has the, we have to remember that the IBM PS2s, which the Mall 30 was the low end, were announced for sales in April of 1987. And the BIOS that's on the system actually is the release 00. And so this is actually, and this is a date, maybe that's where I was thinking of the October timeframe, but it's actually the 2nd of September of 1986 for these BIOS chips. Is the date on them, the revision 00. There's a later revision that was in December 12th of 1986. And there's also a release right before, I think it was February, they did the revision 02, just like the BIOS that is on this planar and many other Mall 30 planars. And also the Model 50, Mall 60, which are based on the 286 CPU, those low-end microchannel systems that were in the initial PS2 release, have BIOS dates of also in February of 1987. That's their initial revision 0 release. So this is actually the oldest video BIOS for a PC type, and especially for the MCGA and VGA. This revision actually has a video font on it that IBM changed on the next BIOS revision, on revision 01, which is still in December of 1986, when the PS2s were starting to be sold for, the announcement for sales being in April of 1987. So that's even, a good 4 months before for that second revision, much less this first revision of 00, predating that release by quite a long period of time. And I intend, especially with the bodge wire, this just appears to be an early Mall 30 planar, and I intend to keep it out because there's even the concept that there's the possibility for the color bars being displayed at some point during the post routine as the system boots up. And of course, I still have to get a RAM deck. So if I put another planar in here into this system, the 7496, then it's got that RAM deck. This is the only instance where I've seen that RAM deck with a socket connection on the planar, not being soldered in. And so I've selected, it's going to be the planar. It's got a green PCB that has the same BIOS as this, and a very similar release date for that planar, despite being the green in colorization. And as I explained earlier, normally the brown PCBs denote a lot of the time of an earlier release of a board, adapter, or a planar in this case, and the green planars are the later release, just when the production ramps up quite a bit more They went to a green PCB. So I'll be having this separate. Also, I want to get this planer out with it going through that initialization failure, and I can run it from a bigger Model 30 power supply just to see if it still halts at that postcode 07 or not with the bigger power supply. But I want to have this out for test, and I want to be able to examine a lot of the areas. The MCGA chips are in this area that's exposed on this. At least they're not underneath the power supply and diskette drive tray. But I want to be able to work a little bit closer with this planer, having it out of the case so I can bench a little bit easier, do cold spray on the chips just to see if I can get a little bit better reaction. And I'm having to not go really, really new. I have a few of the planers that are called the Grenic planer that they have the components in different places. And that was a later Model 30 board. And of course, it's not visually authentic the same way within the executive workstation system, but also those SIM sockets with the redesign, the SIM sockets actually end up being switched with the processor and the floating point unit. So they would be underneath this power supply and diskette drive tray, and just make it a lot harder to go through and to change these out. And the hard drive connector is barely visible on these. There would be a possibility to connect it in, but there's just not any mounting otherwise on there for the proprietary drive. And it does bring up the aspect I've not seen on the Model 30. And of course, the Model 30 has 3 riser slots. In this instance, it's blocked out for that top slot. But this is a Model 30 riser that they always had. I saw them with the 20 megabyte proprietary drives, but the Model 25 that came out later on often had, even for just the 2 available 8-bit slots, often had a MFM controller board, and then they had a 3.5-inch MFM drive that was not the proprietary type that was in the Model 25. And I think that IBM was just short of a lot of those proprietary drives, the production, that they ended up having to do a substitution otherwise to come up with that. But I'm going to go through. I will pause the video and I'll come back with this. And as I go through and work, I wish I could do a time lapse. I wish I was situated for cameras a little bit better, that I could go through and just speed it up and me working on things. But I'll come back with the planer I'm going to put in here in place, and we'll go through and make sure to test the diskette drive and make sure that we have a booting lower system in this case, and then I only have to focus on the monitor section from there. So I'm going to unpause just midway through my assembly just to show what I've got swapped in there so far. And I wanted to have it to where the diskette, and then these are clips where the power supply locks in. It actually tilts in and locks in these sections. You can see the proprietary hard drive connector in the back. That's still, accessible. It could have been where the ultimate intention was to have some sort of hard drive access. But I wanted to point out too that most of the screws, and there's a bunch of them around, there's some standoffs that are underneath some of these sections. And these screws, I want to kind of show them how squared off they are in their profile. And then there's just 2 screws of the bunch to get out all the power supply and everything. And these are what they look like in profile. A bit more rounded off. And since there's 2, they're different. And I think they're pretty close to the same thread. But that's for the power supply, just these 2 in the corner. All the squared off screws are in the other locations, the 2 here, and all the ones that are fastening down the planer or the tray on top of the standoffs. So that's what that looks like. And I can probably do a couple pictures with my phone just to get an idea of where this overlays on top of the planer. Even though I know on video, that's probably a pretty good alignment to show as well, or show what it covers. And I do have the original planer with that diskette drive connection marked out. And just to kind of show, these are individually labeled. And CP8028, it's funny that seems, and there's like an engineering level. And the 8028, it's funny because that matches the later substitution of the MCGA, one of the MCGA controller chips. And that's the old one there. That's that 72X8300. But I'm going to make one sort of modification here as well with this, that I'll leave this diskette drive connection with the planer. And I'm actually going to go through and do the double. And I didn't really show this when it's in a mol 30 because it's the same placement roughly on a mol 30 where the diskette drive A normally connects this, and that access, that slide for the drive is just right under this. And so you have with the twist, you've got the connection for A, and then normally, and with the way that this cable is folded, you kind of see the X there. It's the way it's pre-folded. If you had a 720 KB B drive, this is the position over here that it would be in. And it would be folded just like that. There's the FRU part number at 68X2827. And then if you had the 360 KB adapter, and I've got spares of those, I'll go through, and I just want it as an option that I can put that on the riser to have an external B drive that's 360 KB, that 4869-001 external diskette drive that's 360 KB, 5.25 diskettes. And so that's the retro mod I'm going to do to this, just to have that extra bit of the cable, the regular mol 30 diskette drive cable for that. And so I'll go further when I have the rest of us in place and bring it up on video again. And right as I put the power supply in place, I want to point out something of how these clips look. And kind of looking at the clips, this has been a little bit of my experience, as well as probably some others, with the 7496 right here, of kind of what I think, or what they're rough analog of. And this is the marking on the back of the power supply. Just marked as 1 amp at that voltage rating for the input. And from 100 to 125 volts AC, almost like even a 100 volt being the Japanese level. And then there's the stickers that are on top. Hazardous area, train service personnel only. Line voltage present with machine power off. And of course, if you had it plugged in and the monitor section off, and you do have to have, here's those security bits. In fact, I'm going to pause once again here and see if I can find the security bits that fit that to identify them. And there's 4 of those, 2 per side. And for all that, this does not, oh, okay, that's right. I saw that on the 8-Bit Guy video, that squirrel cage fan that he remarked he'd never seen a fan like that. And it might be a thought sometimes. I mean, there's video of him having the power supply open when replacing the fuse, but going through and opening that and taking some pictures of that. But let me see if I can find a security bit for that. And my my T15, it looks like it would fit the outside of it, but it's not got enough. And maybe that's just a cheap T15, because the pillar inside there is bigger than what my T15 has. And maybe if that were bigger, or maybe I'm just not getting it right, that's a T that's not a T15 bit, but so at least I'm not going through and having to open up this power supply. I had my mic muted, and at least I caught it in the segment before I went through and continued further. I'll have to go through over that section again. I'm trying to. There's multiple pausings, and I'll get comments that I've got stuff on my beard like Adrian Black. But I was saying that the power supply hooks into these loops on the platform tray, and the so to take the back brackets out, because they could, if they're in place, they actually they go into that cutout at the very end when the power supply is in place. And I've got the power cables connected. Let's get this, and I'll get the riser level ready as the riser ready as well. One of the things I want to do, I could do this even with it back in place, although that would be under load. And this even has a battery settings, but it has the both the AC and the DC on the same selector dial. I've never seen a voltmeter like that. And if I could get, so that's 2.81 below 3 volts. And my other risers, okay, that's no battery on that one. I pulled the battery off, I think, for an L40SX. This one's got a battery. And juggling things. So that reads 3.36. Doubt if I can hold everything as I make. That's just trying to align too many things at once. .36. So, I mean, that should be enough of a battery for this. I won't have that little odd little thing on there that tells you not to use the top, slot, but let's get this in position. And these little riser catches, I mean, they can be popped on there after you have the power supply in place. Just this thing doesn't, I guess maybe you just have to have the screws in the back to hold the the top piece up. And the bracket screws are different too. So you want to keep those independent. Okay. That's centered. And I don't want to fumble any of these screws or anything like that either. Guess it'd be great to show what I'm working on screen. Yeah, those are the right. So that's the back and the little squirrel cage fan outputs there. And let's get this riser clipped in. That middle finger goes over the top. I can call it the middle finger. I mean, it's the middle finger there. Where that metal goes over the top of the riser. And these here. And I think I'm done with all the pausings. Because that just gives me more complexity that I have to make sure I've got remember to get my mic. And those are the square shoulders. They're squared off again, just to look like almost like all those planer screws. So you might think if you have two screws separate, that they would go there, but it's actually those lower shouldered screws go on the back of the power supply. If I can get these screws in, we can bring this thing up to the camera again. But I didn't put on my fingertips this morning, apparently, or it's late enough. I'm going through, and I don't want to get hasty. Oh, come on, thread. There you go. Okay. The other thing I could do is look at my audio levels. And at least I do have my wireless mic on with my back facing my recording system. And I think that the audio, yeah, I still have good audio levels there. And so the last part of this, and I'll have that loosed in, there's the mounting of the diskette drive. And I have it exactly, except it's got that marking on there for when I tested it good. But this is going to be the next thing we're going to test. And so it locks in, clips in the front. So there is that planer in there. No block off on that third top slot. I wanted to show on the front, this is just IBM reusing stuff. But it's got a third that even sits well above for that adapter guide there. And I'll have this diskette cable kind of flopping around there, but that's fine. And see, that puts it in perfect position. If you have the external diskette drive adapter. In fact, I should go through at some point and grab that spare one just to show the case, but I won't go through it. Let's test this. And in this instance, I think I'm going to go to the back monitor here. We can keep everything on screen. I just have to change over on my video source. And it's kind of interesting for all that. We've got our postcode reader into our mouse connection. And you're seeing the Ace hardware envelope I tucked in my pocket. Now you can probably see my flashlight in there. And so when it's outside the case like this, it doesn't need that angled power plug, at least. Okay, we're gonna have to do something to get this postcode reader. Okay, get that power for the postcode reader there. Let me get a power cord. And I'll go through and get that plugged in. What I'm going to do here is I will plug all this in. Remember that plug is angled on the back. Okay. Let's get this held up so it doesn't short out anything of there. And that should be visible. For giving us postcodes. That cable is still very short. We do. I still have that painter's tape around here somewhere too. Let's do that. Okay. And so I have everything plugged in. Of course, I've got the power switch on the side of the monitor. We get our input changed over. Okay. So we have our nice little everything in our base. Play beat the clock and get a diskette in the drive. Okay, gives us that. Okay, and it gave us a diskette drive error. Oh, and keyboard error. So keyboard error, resume F1 key. I'm going to go through and I'm going to flip this off. I was doing all my little connections otherwise and forgot the keyboard cord. And I was looking right at that, when I should have been thinking about connecting that after I connected the mouse. Okay, it's connected. Diskette in the drive. Of course, we got the keyboard error before, and this is set up for, as an A drive. In fact, let's make sure. I mean, it's got twists and everything else in there. I've got my other. Okay, my good. Might as well have it up here because there's a chance I still even have the right. So the drive select is at 1, the 1 position. Kind of dusty for that one. It shows the position. Let's go ahead. And if it shows bad, again, we just go through and swap it out too. Okay, set time and date. And then that diskette drive error, we're going to see just pressing the F1. Okay. And this should throw us into ROM basic if we do F1. Okay. Okay. So bad diskette drive. We can work with that. We go through, we'll probably have to put this, swap this sled on the bottom. And that's Phillips screws that I have here. Okay. So right there, and I never heard the motor or anything else. I mean, I'll have to check over that drive. And the way we'll do this is to get all these screws started. I was going to say not to drop any screws. And we know that this diskette drive worked before with the same planer that we had benched. We still have the diskette in there. Okay. And we have that marking on top of the good test, but set date and time, resume F1 key, no diskette drive error that time. And we're right at just under 45 minutes. I even had that section of probably a couple minutes, few minutes to. Okay, so what we're going to do, 02, 11, for the date, time, okay. So there we have a booting lower assembly and how much it took just to get to this point. Had to swap out the planer, had to swap out the diskette drive. We've got this assembly off to the side that we still have to troubleshoot this. And I'm not done yet. I'm going to go through. I want to do just a brief reboot because I want to make sure it's able to hold the time and date from that riser, the battery on the riser. So, are we going to get prompted for, set time and date? Or set date and time, I guess it's a different order, same thing. So I'm going to figure out why with even with that battery level, of why it is not going through and retaining the time and date. The real-time clock is beneath that tray as well. But I remember I was not even seeing that with the this benched planer before. Maybe I'll have to do a comparison to the planer I pulled out of there. And I mean, I'm set for being able to bench this. We can go to an hour-long video. That'll be what it'd take to get everything going. We'll have to borrow the diskette drive. Well, we'll see how far it gets. I can probably just connect up the planer and have the postcode reader on it to see if the bigger power supply is going to get us any further. I doubt that it will, but it's worth a check. And I wanted to go through and show, let's get this thing turned off. I mean, I did use this voltmeter otherwise to go through, and I checked resistance. I wish I could, I brought this up to the screen before, but I went through and I'm getting some resistance, so it's not like there's a connector unplugged on this. But this this cable assembly, and I'll probably do a separate video with working on the monitor. I can open up this cable connector, get the monitor opened up. I've gone through, there's supposed to be just a couple pieces that you press and hold, but I haven't been able to get these two pieces separated yet. So maybe that's just another video. I think I can go through. Let's pause. I'll leave the microphone down so it won't mute me or anything like that. And let me see if I can go through and bench this. Well, no, that'll be something else. I'll bench that later on. I don't think it's going to get any further. We went through, we got this lower assembly working. We can revisit. We can revisit that planer, gain that going and operational, or see what the fault is. Maybe have some freeze spray and things like that available at that time. But I'm just tuckered out from going through and working with this thing. And there'll be more video. I'm gonna get some closure. I'm gonna get a sealed unit that hopefully we should be able to get video out of it. But we've got that major step further and can kind of address things from there. And I'll get that, I think I'm going to get that diskette adapter in there too. So enough of a productive video in this case. And certainly if you enjoyed it and you enjoyed seeing how us, see how we were able to get a little bit further, go ahead and click on that like button, please. And of course, subscribe to my channel. If you have not done so already, recommend it to your friends so that they can subscribe too. But this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.